Welcome, everybody. Not starting. All right, welcome, everybody. I'm delighted to be here. This topic tonight is a really, really powerful topic. It's a delicate conversation. It's such a timely conversation. Tonight's topic is going to be building spiritual and financial resilience during this pandemic, during these times of crisis. As we know, it is a time of tremendous financial worry for so many. I recently asked ladies in my community, in my newsletter, I asked them, what is the number one financial worry that you have right now? And the emails came flooding in. And to tell you the truth, some of the answers were heartbreaking. There is tremendous stress, tremendous anxiety, tremendous worry. And as I was telling the ladies, and let's be honest, we compound that, we add to that the guilt of, how could I be even worried about this when there's really the worry and the pain of the ill and the lives that lost and everything that's going on. And so all of this is really, when I hear the answers of what people are going through, and we add it to all of this, it really is the perfect challenge for anxiety and depression and so much more. I mean, so many of you might be going through similar situations. I've heard from many that there might be job loss, people have lost their jobs, or you might be just terrified of losing your job, or as I heard from many women, of your husbands losing their jobs. There might be financial tensions. There might be, tensions in the marriage due to this. And of course, the quarantine doesn't help. There is, your business might be completely on hold. There's no revenue coming in. There's tremendous pressure that brings. And some people don't even know how to make it to the end of the month, right? So, and the list really goes on and on. And the list goes on and on. So what I want to share with you today, with God's help, is Judaism's view, Judaism's perspective. I want to share with you some Jewish wisdom, some Jewish insights that could really help give us some light into this situation. Because at the end of the day, we want to come out of this situation, and we will. That's the truth of the matter. We are going to come out of this. But what we want to try to achieve is we want to change certain things in our thinking, in our feelings, in our behaviors around our money, around our financial life, that really can have an impact now and really transform the way we move going forward and the way we come out of this challenge. And really the bottom line is, as I always say, we want to come out of this stronger. We want to come out of this strengthened. And I'll tell you very honestly, I remember the reason why this topic is so near and dear to my heart is because I remember years ago, some of you might remember the last recession that we experienced. I'm assuming many of you do. Some of you might be a little bit too young, but you might remember the last recession, 2008, and those were really, really challenging times for many people. And I was one of them. It really was a hard time in my life. And this time really, in so many ways, prepared me for today, because what happened in my life, without getting into all the details that are not relevant at the moment, but is that not only did it open my eyes to certain things that needed to change in my financial structure and the way I manage my money, let's say, certain practical things, but more importantly, it taught me to tap into a resource in my financial arsenal that I didn't even realize was so key. And that was my Judaism, my Jewish observance, Jewish wisdom, my inheritance. And I can tell you quite honestly that it wasn't the one thing that moved the needle for me at that time, the one thing that really changed my thoughts, my speech, my behavior around money, around my financial life, was Judaism. And this is a resource that is very often overlooked. It's very often untapped. And I think what really, really can help us, of course, is this idea. And of course, I'll be the first one to tell you, we often look at our financial lives in very tactical ways. And I'll be very honest, I'm the very first one to tell you that some of those things are very important. For example, we tend to think about, well, how much am I contributing to my retirement account, and how much am I saving, and how comfortable am I with my debt and my budget and my cash flow, and building a stronger cash cushion, and my investments and my business and all these things. And we all have to get comfortable with these ideas, with these financial terms. We certainly have to. They're all important. But even more important than that, gaining that literacy and that confidence, is to really gaining the literacy and the comfort and the inspiration and the enlightenment from the wisdom of our Torah. Really using that as what illuminates our entire financial life. And when we do that, that changes the entire financial paradigm that we operate under. That changes everything. And so yes, now we might say, but we're in such a crisis, how can I even think about it? But the idea that we're going to try to establish today is that if we do that now, if we tap into this now, if we start building those new thoughts, those new habits, those new behaviors now in whatever way we can, not only is that going to help us transform our financial reality and get us out of this whatever situation, specific situation we might be in a much calmer way, and go through it in a much calmer way, but we're going to be a lot better off later. And there is going to be, obviously this is going to pass. And I want to restate again that just going back to the last recession, that it really wasn't, when I look back at it, I laugh because it wasn't my background in investment banking. It wasn't my background in finance. It wasn't my MBA really that did it for me. It really, what moved the needle was tapping into this wisdom. And it was a period of my life from 2008 onwards, 2009, 2010, that was really, really transformational. So please God, with God's help, I'm going to try to share some of that wisdom, because what I really want for all of you to feel is that at the end of the day, we can come out of this with an anchor. We can come out of this feeling that we're anchored in our Torah, that we're anchored in our Judaism, and that no matter what market or whatever comes crashing down around us, we, in our minds, in our hearts, in our homes, we're at peace. That's what we want to achieve. That's where we want to be. So just to give a little, to set expectations right, none of what I'm going to teach you today, there's nothing that I'm going to teach you today that's a quick fix. Nothing. And the reason is because spiritual tools and spiritual development and spiritual growth, it's not quick, right? There's nothing that, it entails work, it entails hard work, deep work. And in fact, for challenges to be really transformational, for challenges to really achieve bringing our potential and bringing us to a higher place, they have to entail, we have to work hard. We have to dig deep and we have to work hard. So there are no quick fixes, but we can do this. So let's get started with the first idea that I want to touch on today, that I think it's key. I think it's very, very key. And this is the idea of values. And let me just start by telling you that many, many years ago, well, not that many, but a few years ago, I came across an article in one of the financial publications. I can't really recall what it was. It's maybe the Wall Street Journal, something. And it was an article on marriage, on money. And it was one of those articles that talks about how money can be such a source of discord in couples. And, we all know those statistics and all that. But there was something in this article that was actually quite unique to that conversation. And it said the following. It said, divergent views and values can make money a point of tension within couples. And that really struck with me. Values, not money, values. Because really so much of our financial life is about our values. If we ask most people, what their values are. They'll probably tell you, and Sarah, I see you on the chat, if you could maybe share with me, anybody else who's there who wants to share, what are your values? Most of us will probably answer things like family, things like community, self-development, growth, health, our children's future, our legacy, Jewish continuity. Those are all very, very important things. But here's the tricky part. Most of us haven't really ever thought intentionally or even articulated, let alone write down what those values are. So what happens is our values stay as this abstract thing that we assume they should be implicit in our behavior. And yes, we value family and education. Thank you, Teresa. Exactly. And so here's the tricky part. We assume that these things should be there. Our behaviors should match up to our values. Our behavior should reflect, that's the word I'm looking for, should reflect those values. But here, the shocking news is that very often, sadly, that is not the case. Very often, if we're very, very honest and we look at the way that we're spending our money and our time, which is a separate conversation, but it's the same idea, we will see that it doesn't reflect what we really value. So here's the hard truth. The hard truth is that financial statements are value statements. Financial statements are very, very telling about what we really, really value. So how do I had somebody recently, who told me they had asked the rabbi to come and walk through their new home to tell them the price of, not the price really, but to see how many mezuzot they needed for their new home. And she comes to me, she says, yeah, Elle, maybe I should just put one mezuzah in the front of my home, because really it's going to be thousands of dollars. We need so many. There are so many doors. And I said, but you just built yourself a 10,000 square foot home. And you can't welcome God into the home? You can't do that? Or like so often we say we value Jewish education, we value Jewish continuity, but how much are we investing in the education of our children, in our own education, in our own spiritual growth, in our own development, right? Yet we're putting our money on other things, cars and vacations and gadgets and trips and all sorts of other things. Like the man who complained to us recently that there was the tefillin for his son were going to be, I don't know, $1,800, $2,000. How could it be? But sir, the DJ for your party is $2,500. The caterer is $5,000, $7,000. So it requires tremendous, tremendous honesty. But the idea is that very often we're not asking ourselves the right questions. And we really need to be asking ourselves, what are my values? What are my Jewish values? And we don't ask these questions just when we're dating our spouse. These are questions that we need to be asking our entire life. Am I living according to my Jewish values? And are my numbers aligned with those values? Is my money financing those values? Is it? Now, the reality is that we could say, well, how do we do that? It's really, really hard, especially in this day and age where we're constantly bombarded with, it's not just our advertising, but it's Facebook and it's Instagram and it's everything everything that everybody else has and everybody else does, right? And this one has this kitchen and this wardrobe and those vacations and that trips, and how come I don't have it? How come my husband doesn't take me in it? We can live our life in this roller coaster, and it can get really, really, really confusing. So how do we get so clear on our values? So before I tell you that, I'm going to share with you a little bit of an embarrassing story, an anecdote that happened to me recently. And as I said before, it's kind of embarrassing because the truth is, really, I was thinking of this when there's so much pain going on, but it's worth it's worth talking about it. And the story goes like this. About 6 weeks ago, when we started this quarantine, I think I'm now going into week 7, and I realized all the kids were going to be home, and I'm going to be home with my husband, and the whole thing is, unfolding before my eyes. I had a really irrational, totally emotional reaction that really could have had potentially serious financial consequences. And that is, it could be summed up in one phrase. My reaction was, I've got to fix my house now, pronto. Like, we have to take care of. Meaning, all of a sudden, I became fixated on every little repair, every little broken thing, every, thing that we've had been putting off for months, sometimes years, because we had other financial priorities. But the thought of all of us being together in this space just made me feel like, oh my gosh, if I fix this and I fix that and I fix the half bathroom and I tile that floor that never got done and whatever it was, then this quarantine is going to be more livable. And so I even went and I looked for quotes, and I even made a budget. I was going to present my husband with a budget and so many other things like that. And, called some contractors, some people to come in and give us quotes. We didn't do it. Don't worry. We didn't do it. But here's what happened. Here's how we came to this decision. And this is where I think the conversation is going to be very telling about the importance of getting clarity on what our values are. So what happens is my husband and I have this regular habit of having what we call, and we developed this and we've perfected this over the years since the last recession, of having what we call money dates. And these is really times that we schedule, they're regularly scheduled on our calendars, where we sit together and we have an open, honest communication about our finances, and we take a look at everything that's going on in our financial life. And we base a lot of those discussions on values, which obviously we've already established before during the early days of those money dates. But this is a way that we ensure that every financial decision that we make gets discussed before it's made. So on this particular money date, we went for a walk outside our home. We live in a nice cul-de-sac, they call it. It's a roundabout, and there's Texas, beautiful weather. We go outside to get some fresh air, and I'm presenting this whole thing, and we had such a good laugh, because ultimately the foundational idea and the most important idea of these dates is the values conversations. Is really what ends up happening is that we try to filter each and every one of our financial decisions through our values. And so what happened is, all we had to do is ask 2 questions to make the decision. And those questions were, what are the things that we are currently funding that we hope to continue funding during a financial crisis? And those things were our children's school tuitions, charity, the Jewish holidays. Passover was soon approaching, plus there's other Jewish holidays, our health, and so on and so forth, right? And so once we establish these things, then the next question really gave us the answer. Because really the next question is, if we were to spend on those things right now, meaning the home renovations and the home projects, would we be risking our ability to fund those things that are really, really important to us? And if the answer is yes, then the answer to the home renovations is no. I mean, it was clear as day. So that is just to illustrate how having that clarity can avoid so much of the confusion and the noise that often happens, and help us really establish the clarity. But really, what I also want to add to this conversation is that today, in this situation that we find ourselves in today, in this pandemic, the time is really ripe to have to understand what my values are. Because the truth of the matter is, friends, that everything has been stripped to its essence. There are no more facades. What's really important to us is now right in front of us. We're not running after every other thing, because we have it. It's really the situation that God has sent upon us has really just opened our eyes to what really is essential and important in life. And so we have it in front of us. So this exercise of identifying what my values are is really a lot easier right now, and probably a lot more critical, but thankfully a lot more easier. But if you want to go the extra mile, there's another thing that you can do that is also very telling, and that is you can use the power of your imagination. And you can imagine yourself at the end of your life, and asking yourself, what kind of life did I want to live? What do I want to leave behind? What's my legacy? And that's going to really, really show you what you truly value. And the bottom line is that we want to get to a place where we can say with honesty that we've lived a life according to those values that our Creator has established for us in the blueprint of the Torah. And again, like I said, my friends, these things are in front of us. Family, community, health, mental health, spiritual health, physical health, Shabbat, the home unit, the family unit, the marriage. All of these are the things that now we've been put in a situation where we have to work on these things, and we have to, this is what's in front of us. There are no more distractions. It's all unveiled. So really, can we get to a point where we can confidently say, I put my money where my values are. And if I get to the point, if I get there, then I'm going to be so much better after this crisis, both financially and spiritually. I'm going to be on another level. It's another level. So that's number one. That's the values idea, which is so, so important and so often overlooked. Now, and by the way, I should mention that it can really be transformational for those of you who are married. It really can be transformational in our marriage. Really, really, we have to get very clear on what are the values for our families, and we have to get on the same page with that. And when we live like that within the family nucleus and with our children, it really is another experience. And again, a lot of the financial decisions take just a different meaning, a different depth, and tremendous, tremendous clarity. So let's go on to the second point, which is, I think, the most important point that we can learn to utilize as a financial tool, as a tool to help us really enrich the way we think, the way we behave, the way we speak, the way we feel about our money, etc. And that is the concept of trust. In Hebrew, we call it bitachon. Bitachon, like the Israeli security, the bitachon, the security, right? It's trust in God. And sometimes people confuse it with faith, with emunah. But the truth is that they're not the same. They're not the same at all. And we can't go into the difference because we don't have time. But there is a tremendous difference. So what I'm going to do with you is I'm going to share with you a nice visual that I think is one of the clearest ways that I've seen explain the difference between these two ideas, okay? So here's what we're going to imagine. We're going to imagine that we have this tightrope walker, this man, who goes on the building with the rope, whatever, right? And this tightrope walker, he's in the Empire State Building and he's ready to do his thing. Emunah, faith, is going, you can do it. You've got this. You're great. You're awesome. You're going to do amazing. That's faith. Bitachon, trust, is jumping on the guy's back. Jumping on the guy's back. That is trust. You see the difference? It's a huge difference. It's an entirely different thing. A huge, huge difference. So there was once a man who was schlepping to the marketplace. He's going to the marketplace and he's carrying his big, big bag, his big load, and he's schlepping away and drives this nice gentleman, this wealthy gentleman in his wagon with his horses, and he stops and he sees the man and he stops and he offers him a ride. Says, I see you're going, are you headed to the marketplace? Yes. Can I please give you a ride? You look like you have a heavy load. Perfect. So he jumps in and they're riding in the wagon. And after a few minutes, the nice gentleman says to the simple man, he says, why don't you take the load off your back? And the simple man says, oh no, Isn't it enough that your horses are carrying my weight? I should also burden them with the load of my bag? So the gentleman says, you silly. You think the horses are not carrying your load already? Very, very often, friends, we're like this silly man in the story. Very often we forget that God is carrying our load. We forget, we put God out of a job. Like, why are we putting God out of a job? He has very, very broad shoulders, if we haven't noticed. Really, he does. And very often we forget that. You know, we are all familiar with this concept, this phrase in the US dollar bill, right? In God we trust. And it's not a coincidence that this is what it says in our dollar bill, because the bottom line is that our finances, our money is one of those areas in life where our trust is put to the test most often. I mean, look at us now, right? Look at us now. But it says there, in God we trust. And this is such a reminder and such a key place, right? But if we put our trust in the stock market and in our business and in our talents and in our boss and our employer and our managers and whatever it might be, yeah? Then how do you think we're going to handle? What happens? We tend to believe that our financial success is a result of our own efforts. That's what we tend to believe. But what happens when we don't see the results? What happens when there's no success? What happens when there's a downturn? What happens in a situation like now? What do we do then? How do we wake up in the morning? In God we trust. But if we've put our trust in all those other things and all that is limited, and boy, do we know now how limited all these things are, right? We're seeing it with our very eyes. I mean, that's just what's happened. Who would have thought? From one day to the next, no job, no business, no clients, overnight, boom, right? If we've put our trust in those things, then we're going to have a really, really hard time. But if we are able to put our trust now and always on that which is unlimited, that which is eternal, that which is infinite, that which has the ability to bring you money in infinite amount of ways and to handle all of your problems, all of your troubles, then how calm and confident are we going to be? Not just when there's a financial crisis, but all throughout our lives. All throughout our lives. So how do we do that? How do we build that trust? And here's where I have to tell you honestly that this is constant work. I told you there were no quick fixes. And by constant, I don't mean once a month. I don't mean twice a month. I don't mean twice a week. I mean daily. This is daily work, every single day. Before I give you some tips on this, I do want to mention that it's very interesting because the Rebbe Maharaj, who's the fourth Chabad Rebbe, whose birthday was today, he actually told us very, very bluntly and very direct, a very powerful idea that I think is important for us to stress today, and especially meaningful because it is his birthday. And he taught the following. He taught that in the heavens, there's an abundance of sustenance waiting for a Jew. That a Jew is not deficient in sustenance, but that he is deficient in trust. And that there's an abundance of heaven for him. But if he does not have trust, that abundance might not reach him. Think about that for a minute. It's so powerful. First of all, we're talking about God's abundance. We're talking about the fact that there is abundance. There is for everybody. God has no limits. God has for everybody. And not only is there abundance, but God has infinite ways in which to send that money to you. You are limited. We are limited. We have our own limited notions. But God is not limited by what we think we can only get this client or that job or that deal, right? God is not limited by any of that. And then not only that, But the Rebbe Maharash is telling us, if God forbid, we don't put our trust in God, in the one who can deliver, then maybe that abundance might not reach us. That sustenance that is already allocated and assigned for us might not reach us. These are very, very powerful things, my friends. And the Lubavitcher Rebbe actually expanded on this, gave us a wonderful visual, a wonderful image for us to understand this idea. And the Rebbe talked about a faucet. Imagine a faucet. The Rebbe says, bitachon, trust, is like a faucet. When you have it, when you have bitachon, when you have trust, the blessings pour through. They flow down, they flow through. But when you don't have it, when you don't have trust, when you don't have bitachon, it's like the faucet is closed. It's closed off. It's a very, very powerful image. It's very, very clear. Now, how do we do it? How do we do it? I said it's constant work. It's constant work. And the truth is, it begins with meditating daily on these concepts that I just told you. It begins with the study of Hasidut, of course. It begins with learning about God's infinite existence and omnipresence and all of that, which Hasidus helps on. There's also, I didn't mention, but it's very interesting that the Rebbe, there's also a text called the Gate of Trust, which is a portion within another text, another classic Jewish text called the Duties of the Heart by Rabbeinu Bachya. And in that text, there's also this idea that when we talked about before this concept that we sometimes fail and we put our trust in that which is limited and we put our confidence in all these other things, and now we've seen it's totally worthless, right? We can't really rely on any of it. Our boss and the stock market and our retirement account and who knows what, wherever we put our trust, our employer, our business. So Rabbeinu Bachya explains in his book, and Hasidus also expands on this idea that when we do that, God limits his providence. God limits his providence from us. It's like, okay, you're taken care of. You think you have it under control? You're trusting in something else? Okay, he hides himself. He hides himself. He waits. Okay, fine. Be well. And again, if we don't, then we're tapping into the infinite. Then we have access to everything that God has to offer. And it's even incredible because really our mind expands, our creativity, the solutions to our problems, all of that, which really comes from God. We're in another state. Not only we're calm, but we're more creative, we're more expansive, and all of that. So one of the points here is really constant meditation on these ideas. And of course, I highly encourage the study of that book, which happens to be that many, many years ago during not that many, but over a decade ago during the last recession, I happened to come across the Lubavitcher Rebbe's responses to many people who were facing financial challenges, who would write into the Rebbe. And very, very often the Rebbe would bring out the point of building trust in God and really strengthening our trust in God. And he would give explanations. And very often he would direct people and encourage them to please learn the Shara B'tachon, the Gate of Trust, which, to actually mention some practical tip, there is a beautiful, wonderful Jewish publication called Chayenu, which with such foresight, a little bit over a year ago, I think they started publishing, including in the weekly publication, portions from the Gate of Trust. So this is one idea. But there's also, of course, the idea of saying King David's Psalms, Tehillim, and really even more further than that, really understanding the meaning behind the Tehillim, behind the Psalms can be really, really strengthening. But I'll give you a really small practical tip that you can start as soon as tomorrow morning. And I found this really transformative for myself, and I actually take it quite seriously. And this is a short prayer that we have as part of our morning blessings. Our morning blessings, if you have a prayer book, Siddur at home, or if you don't, then you can, of course, you can download one on your phone, an app. But there is something called the morning blessing that we say every morning when we wake up. And there is one specific blessing there that is part of these morning meditations, because really that's what they're meant to be, and that's what all of prayer is supposed to be, a meditation. Again, talking about meditating on God's greatness. And this one blessing says the following, and I'm going to break it apart for you because I think you're going to gain a lot from this. And this says, "Blessed are you, God, King of the universe, who has provided me with my every need." And so think about this for a second. First of all, God, right? Not Uncle Sam, not the stock market, not American Express, not my husband, God. God is the one who gets. For sure, I have to do my part. For sure, I have to create a vessel to receive the blessings. In fact, the Torah says, God says in the Torah, "I will bless you in all that you do." You have to do. But the blessings come from Him, from God. In God we trust. My every need, not what I think I want, not my home remodeling, not my wants, not what Instagram and Facebook is telling me that I should have and I should have right now. But what are my needs? What are those things that are truly important? Going back to our values conversations. All of my needs. And finally, has provided me in the past tense. Meaning just like He provided for me yesterday, He will provide for me today. He has a great track record. Do we even grasp that? It's very, very, very profound. In fact, I'll tell you, you can do the same thing. I have a little Post-it note right next to this one morning meditation, one morning blessing to really, really help me say it with mindfulness and with intention, to really be able to meditate and focus on it. So friends, we have to work on this daily, and we have to jump on the guy's back. And we have to let God carry the load. We have to understand that God has our back. In fact, go write it in your bathroom mirror. God has my back. So that you can internalize it, because that is the truth. You know, there's a beautiful story about a chassid from Poland. And this man was a very well-to-do businessman. He was he had his own business for many years. He was a charitable man. He was a nice fellow. Everybody loved him. But he had this very strange, unusual quirk. And that is that every day after prayers in the synagogue, he would go up to the bima and he would bang his hand and he would yell out, "Emuna, simcha, bitachon," faith, joy, trust. And that was his thing. That was his shtick. Everybody knew it. Whatever, you know. Except one day, this man there was a huge fire, and he lost everything. His warehouse, his inventory, his factory, everything went up in flames. There was nothing left. And the next day, goes up to shul, there's prayers, and again, he goes up to the bima and he bangs and he yells out, "Emuna, simcha, bitachon." And this not one man who knows him already for years and has seen him do this for years, he can't hold back, and he goes up to him and he says, "Listen, I have to ask you. All these years I've seen you say this daily. And I could understand it. I mean, you were such a wealthy man. You did so well. You had such an amazing, sustenance and abundance and everything else going for you. But now, after the tragedy, after what has happened, can you please explain to me how? Do you just stand here and yell these words?" And so he gave him the following answer. And listen to this answer, because wow, this is just so eye-opening. It's a strange answer. Pay attention. He says to the man, there is a discussion in Jewish law about whether one can say the silent prayer, the Amidah, which we say standing, the standing part of our prayer, the Shmone Esrei, while we are leaning on something. Can we actually say the Shmone Esrei, the Amidah, which is a standing prayer, while we're leaning on something? And Jewish law concludes the following. This is him telling the other man who asked him. Jewish law concludes that if the leaning is such that were one take away the object upon which the person is leaning and the person would fall down, then the person is not allowed to say the Shemona Esrei. Meaning if it's leaning in such a way that if I pull the object from him and he falls down and he collapses, then he cannot say the Shemona Esrei. But if he's leaning in such a way that if they were to take away that thing, that object, and he would not fall, he would stay standing, then that leaning is allowed. Then he is allowed to say the Shemona Esrei, the entire Shemona Esrei, while leaning. Do you understand what this means? So he tells him, all my life I had this business, true, but I never leaned on it. So now it's gone. Because I never leaned on this, then I can continue to say Emuna, Simcha, Bitachon, faith, joy, and trust. And this is what we need to internalize. By the way, it's just really so beautiful. We can't expand on this now, but really the basic is this faith that we touched upon earlier on. But the joy, the Simcha, what is real joy, is really living with that calm and that confidence that comes from having that trust that everything is taken care of, that everything that God does in my life is good, and he will take care of everything. And everything is according to what I need and to my unique purpose in life. That is true joy. That is calm. So this is the idea of trust, which is, as I said, something we have to work on every single day, each and every one of us. But when we have it, you can see, I don't have to tell you again, the results, as the Rebbe Maharash told us, and as the Rebbe reiterated, can be outstanding. It can transform everything for us financially, yes, and in every area of our life. But the third idea that I want to touch upon today is the idea of giving, the idea of Jewish giving. And I know right now, you might be thinking, what? How can we talk about giving when I'm not even making an income, perhaps? Right? How can we even talk about it? But the truth is that this is such a fundamental part of the Jewish financial paradigm that we need to talk about it, that we need to learn it. We need to understand how it works. We need to understand the role that it plays in our financial life, because when we come out of this, we want to make sure, and even now, that we are incorporating this into our life in the right way, that this is really part of our financial paradigm. We must not ignore it. Even if we think, oh my gosh, but right now I can't even give a penny. Well, we're going to talk about it. We're going to talk about it. But it's so important for us to learn it, because again, we're saying that we want to come out of this in the best possible way, not just financially, but also spiritually. So very often, friends, the natural reaction in times of financial crisis is for us to cut back on our giving. That's usually what happens, and the truth is, it happened to me. It happened to me when I look back at the last recession. I'm embarrassed to say, but it's the truth, that one of the first things that we cut out of our expenses was our charitable giving. You know, and it's funny because my husband and I, it's come from a finance background, both of us. So you think about it, it's what makes the most financial sense. That's what we tend to think. But here's where I want to share with you a transformative idea. There are 4 ways in which we can allocate our money. We can invest it, we can save it, we can spend it, or we can give it, right? Those are 4 ways. Ask any financial professional and they'll all tell you these are the 4 categories and this is how it works. But this is how usually we see it. We usually see it as the following. First we save, we invest, right? We probably heard the idea of pay yourself first. So we save, we invest, then we spend, and then with what's left over, we give. Friends, this is a transformative idea right here. Judaism flips this paradigm on its head. We Jews give first. We don't give after everything else has been taken care of. Our home renovations and our cars and our iPhones and our, I don't know what, Nordstrom's annual sale. We have a mitzvah of maaser, of giving 10% of our after-tax earnings to charity. We don't give after we've taken care of. Money comes in, 10% goes out. From the top line, pretty much. That's what we do. Because that money was never really mine. That money was never mine. That was God's money. That is God's money. That God has entrusted me with His money. He's entrusting me that I will act as a fiduciary. I have a fiduciary responsibility towards God. I'm an agent. He's trusting me that I will allocate that money on His behalf. Now, how could I give up that responsibility? And how often do we actually do that? Very often we neglect that responsibility. But this is our responsibility. I remember many, many years ago, perhaps not that many years ago, but I remember that actually, very interesting, before I tell you that story, not so long ago, I read an article. They were interviewing a Jewish philanthropist, and I think it was something like he had given $1 million or something. And one of the questions was something to the effect of, how did he develop this giving nature or whatever? And he said over there, I remember it was so beautiful. He said, you don't come to give $1 million if you haven't given 10, if you haven't given 100, if you haven't given 1,000. And this is so, so telling. And I'm telling you this because we started this conversation saying, but what I can't give right now. So really, the idea is not that we are going to necessarily, all of us, become magnanimous givers of $1 million. Please God, why not? But the idea is that to build that habit, you don't get to that point of generosity if you haven't built that habit from the beginning. If you haven't been building those muscles, if you haven't been taking your fiduciary responsibility serious all along, you don't get to that point. That's the idea. So I remember years ago hearing my dear family friend, Mr. George Rohr, a Jewish philanthropist, say, in the name of Rabbi Yehoshua Gordon, of blessed memory, who happens to have had a lot of correspondence also with the Lubavitcher Rebbe on this issue of trust and financial sustenance and financial challenges. But anyway, so he said, our friend Mr. Rohr said that he learned from Rabbi Gordon that when we give 10% of our money, God guarantees the 90%. Tzedakah is the guarantee of the 90%. Think about this. We've been guaranteed. Where in the world do you get such returns? Show me an investment that has such returns. There is none. That's the bottom line. It doesn't exist. In fact, God has told us, test me on this. Test me. You become my money manager. It's guaranteed. The returns are ensured. Test me. So what happens is very often we don't really we don't really do this systematically. And to go back to the initial story that I was telling you during the recession, where I saw our financial flaw really was in this idea of system, because it wasn't that we weren't generous. It wasn't that we didn't give. We give. Giving is kind of in our Jewish DNA. And one could even say maybe we gave generously, okay? But we didn't have a system. We didn't give tips systematically. So when I said about the financial paradigm, when we flip it and we understand that the system is not you give after everything else, right? And if there's a recession, well, hey, I can't give, I'm so sorry. No, when we understand that the giving happens first, then it's an entirely different reality. It's an entirely different reality. So how do we do this practically speaking? Well, there are several methods really that people practice, but I like the following, and I'm going to be very honest and give it to you because I just think it's simple, it's practical, it's clean, and it builds that habit and it builds that relationship. It builds you up as a giver. It builds those giving muscles and also gives that awareness, that constant awareness of God in our lives and our blessings. And it's so simple that you can start it tonight, really with the click of a few buttons. And this is how it goes. You open your bank account and you open another bank account within that bank account if you want, and you use that as an account that you're going to consistently fund with 10% of your earnings. That's all. Money comes in, 10% goes into that account. And if you want to go the extra mile, you give it an inspiring name. You give it something that really inspires you. You can call it Hashem's treasury. You could call it God's blessings account. You could call it God's blessings. You could call it abundance. You could call it charity, tzedakah, whatever you want. And by the way, this helps with everything in our financial lives. There's many people who say, I don't want to even look at my budget. I hate, right? They don't like this. So call it something inspiring. Call it family plan. Call it, man plans and God laughs. Call it family happiness, and do the same thing with the things in your budget. But that's a separate conversation. But it's important to know, because there's something to be said, and this Judaism speaks about this a lot, about the power of language, about the use of language. So if you want to go the extra mile, you open this account and you give it a really inspiring name. And the idea, again, is you're going to be consistently funding this with this money. And this, the secret, the beauty of this is that it's going to allow you to be a giver even when you think you don't have enough to give. And then when you have these money dates, as I called them before, whether it be with your husband or by yourself, when you regularly sit and look at your numbers and you open this account and you right away decide what causes, what projects, what institutions, what causes are dear to your heart that need your money, and you send that money. And of course, if anybody needs an idea, I could tell you that the Jewish Learning Institute is a very, very worthy cause. But I'm sure everybody has other ideas as well. There are many, of course. But the idea is that we are becoming givers automatically. And even more than that, I mean, how many of us get texts, get WhatsApp messages, knocks on our doors, people really needing money, a medical treatment for somebody, a widow, children who need Jewish education, Jewish camps, whatever. Within instance, within a second, you can log into your new tzedakah account, which you called it a really nice name. You can log in and you can send the money to those in need. You become a giver. You emulate God Almighty. We have a mitzvah to emulate God, and God is the ultimate giver. And this is something that we've inherited, this trait, this character trait from our father, Avram, the first Jew. This is something that is in our spiritual DNA. And like I said, when we take it seriously, and when we understand that this is a part of the financial structure, that is not something that is just there on the side, but it happens top of mind, is this the first thing that happens. And if we structure our financial life like this, we see tremendous change. And I don't have to tell it to you. God has told it to us. God has told it to us. Now you can tell me, but I'm not right now making any money. So how do you want me to give this account? And so I want to talk about the idea of giving, which extends even further than that, for a few minutes, because yes, this is important. It's important for you to know that, but there might be some of you watching who might be in a situation that you're right now not receiving an income, and you might be living off of savings for which you've probably already taken Meiser, you've already taken this, or you might be incurring debt. And by the way, I should clarify also that when I say 10%, 10% is a minimum for everybody. And even somebody who receives the tzedakah themselves, they also have to give Meiser. But of course, there's a range, and very, very wealthy people can give 20%. And in fact, the Alter Rebbe speaks in Tanya about very, very, people can give even more than that, but the typical range that we need to stick to is 10 to 20% for sure. Most of us, at the very least, have to give a 10% of Meiser, okay? So now what happens if I'm in a situation right now in this pandemic, where really I'm just tapping into these savings, which I've already taken Meiser from, our current debt, and this is not really going to be the reality of myself tomorrow. I'm not going to be funding this account, and I've probably already depleted it and given it to so many other people who are in need. With such generosity. So here I'm reminded of the beautiful story of the daughter of Rabbi Akiva. The Talmud records the story of the daughter of Rabbi Akiva, who Rabbi Akiva was told by some astrologers that she was going to pass away on her wedding day. And of course, Rabbi Akiva was concerned about this, but he didn't do anything. The wedding preparations moved along, and the wedding took place, and it was a beautiful wedding, and he just was left with the expectation of what's going to happen to my daughter. So on her wedding night, after everybody went home and everything else, she went home with her husband, and she took her pin off her head. She stuck it on the wall, on a hole in the wall, and she went to bed. And the next morning, when it's daylight, To her horror, she finds the pin, and as she grabs it, there's a snake, a deadly, poisonous, disgusting snake, dead. And she runs up to her father to tell him the cryptic story. He says to her, Baruch Hashem, thank God you're alive. Now please tell me, what did you do yesterday on your wedding day? She says, what do you mean, what did I do yesterday? I did everything that Kala does. I don't know. I prayed and I fasted and we had the chuppah and I danced and I welcomed the guests. And no, that's not it. That's not it. Tell me more. What else? Was there anything unusual? Anything happened? Anything that you did? And she says, well, at some point I noticed that a man came into the wedding hall and he needed food to eat, a poor man, and everybody was busy. Nobody really was paying attention. The waiters weren't around, etc. So I just gave him my plate of food to eat. And he says, that was it. That is what saved you. And Rabbi Akiva kept telling on this story for many years to come to his students, and he would always add the phrase that when the wise King Solomon says in Mishlei that tzedakah saves from death, King Solomon didn't mean just from an unusual death, but really from death itself. And this is obviously a relevant story to the circumstances that we're in this pandemic and this illness and everything else, and God should save each and every one of us. But really, I'm bringing it here not just because of the fact that, yes, that is a truth from the Torah that tzedakah saves from death, but also because here we see very clearly the idea that when we're giving, it's not just giving of our money. This is an important part of our financial structure, and it cannot be underestimated. But we also have a responsibility, as I said before, to emulate God and to be givers. And in fact, right now, this situation in which we find ourselves, this quarantine, this strange situation, again, is ripe for us to give of ourselves in so many other ways. What phone calls can I make? What neighbor can I assist? Who can I bring food? Who can I assist with a kind word, with words of empathy, with ideas of how to keep busy and productive? That kind of giving, we now have been given this incredible opportunity to really hone into this. And it's something that we can all do, and we can all take very seriously. Again, it's right in front of us. We don't have to look too far to find the opportunities. So I'd like to conclude with bringing us back to the ideas that I presented at the beginning of this conversation. And I would like you to imagine that you dropped $100 bill, and you're looking for it, and you're on your hands and knees, and you're looking for this. We're in a money conversation. So maybe you could drop your keys, but let's just stick to the $100 bill. You dropped your $100, and you're on your hands and knees, and you're looking for this. And your friend comes over, and he says, what are you doing down there? And you say, oh, I lost a $100 bill. He says, okay, let me help you find it. Tell me, where'd you drop it? Where'd you lose it? And you say, oh, I dropped it over there. And he says, so why are you looking for it down here? And you said, oh, no, because there's more room over here. Friends, very often we're looking for answers, and we're looking for solutions. And we're looking where it feels more comfortable, where there's more room, and not where the answer is going to be. And so in this situation, now that we're facing this unusual circumstances, and again, we're facing another recession and all that. If we as Jewish people who have had such an inheritance, if we look for the answers in the wisdom of our Torah, in God's Torah, the written Torah, the oral Torah, we will find all the answers to our financial problems. We will find all of these things that really are going to shed light into how we should operate our financial lives, how we should think, how we should feel, how we should behave. And really, we're going to find the vaccine to all of these financial problems. So really, we have it. It's just a matter of utilizing it and not overlooking this most important financial resource. And so with that, I want to bless us all that we should have tremendous fortitude, and we should be able to implement all of these things that we shared today and really go above and beyond implementing these things so that we can truly start feeling that calm, that confidence, and that God should respond in kind, helping each and every one of us overcome these problems, and really with a lot of joy, with a lot of tranquility, and that will lead us to the ultimate time when nobody will face any of these challenges, when there'll be a time of light, a time of joy for the entire world with our righteous Mashiach. May it be speedily in our days. Thank you so much for joining, and I'm going to look on the chat, and I'll be sure to answer any questions that you put on the chat. If anybody wants to contact me privately and ask me any questions, please feel free. You can contact me at yael@jewishlatinprincess.com, and I always answer my emails. And if there were any women watching this broadcast who are interested in learning more with me, more in depth about some of these topics even more, and really getting very tactical and strategic, I'm running a women's only online course. It's going to be fabulous. It's starting very soon, and please, I invite all of you ladies to check it out at jewishlatinprincess.com/JMM for Jewish Money Matters, jewishlatinprincess.com/JMM, so you can get all the information, and hopefully I will either see you there or I will see you soon on the chat, or in my inbox. Be very, very healthy, very, very well. Have a wonderful, wonderful week.